morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We're going to have a wonderful session, and we're very happy that you're able to join us today. Just quickly, in terms of rules, we want to say that for questions, we do not want you to put your questions in the chat box. We want you to ensure you put your questions in the Q&A box. So that's important to note. We also want to let you know that you'll be getting the recording, so you will be able to go through and revise some of the concepts and ideas that you see from this session. You'll get that within 48 hours of us completing the webinar. You will also get the handout, so no need to worry, the slides will be shared with you. So you will have the information. We want you to learn. We want you to be able to, go back to the information and ensure you make the best use of it. We know the time is very short that we have for this webinar, and we have a lot to share. So we will get right into the webinar. So today, our pilot is Howard Rome. I want to call him the grandfather of strategy. He has more than 40 years of strategy experience. In 2022, he was inducted in the Hall of Fame for the International Association of Strategy Professionals. That's a great deal. Not every day we get to be in the presence of a Hall of Fame strategist. So, he's going to lead, he's going to share great insights. He's an author. He is one of the pioneers who supported the Association of Strategic Planning body of knowledge, which is a very powerful body of knowledge for strategy professionals. Howard was a co-author, he's a pioneer. So very experienced, and he's also the architect and engineer behind creating the 9 Steps to Success framework, which is used by so many companies over the world. And he has led consulting in over 40 countries across industries. So he has a whole lot of insights to share with you today. I also want to introduce our co-pilot, Claudette. Claudette is very experienced in HR and strategy. She has over 15 years experience working in strategy, working in HR. She worked as Director of Human Capital for Unicom Jamaica. She was working in different Caribbean countries, very experienced. She's Balanced Scorecard certified. She's a Balanced Scorecard professional. So she will have incredible insights to share as co-pilot. And me being your host and also co-facilitator will also be able to share insights with you over the years. I've worked in consulting over 15 years as a consultant, strategist, working for some of the most prestigious companies in Jamaica. I've done work for Jamaica Stock Exchange. I've worked for FHI 360. I've also worked for the British Council, Tetra Tech. So I've worked with a range of organizations across different industries. I've worked in the cannabis industry. I've worked in the tourism industry. So we will be able to share lots of insights with you today. And we want you to benefit tremendously. So the Balanced Scorecard Institute and ROIC, we have worked with a range of clients, supporting them with strategy, supporting them with training and certification, with project management, with strategy execution software. And this is just a very modest list of clients that we have worked with over the years. Just to note that we have supported entities like UNICEF. We have worked with Marshall Energy Company. We've worked with Bank of Jamaica, and you can see the list of clients that we have worked with, and we've worked extensively with local, international, regional clients. There's no company too big for us to support them with strategy. Balanced Scorecard has an impeccable track record supporting companies with strategy using the award-winning 9-step to success framework. And now we will definitely get some insight from our facilitators. Yes, so just to walk you through quickly what the session will look like today, and in terms of the flow of the presentation. So we'll take a look to bring some context to you in terms of traditional strategic planning. This will definitely set the context. Then we will bring to you Balanced Scorecard, balanced strategic planning. And more so, we want to bring you now more specifically to the proprietary approach that the Balanced Scorecard Institute takes using the 9-step framework. It's a very logical step-by-step approach. And again, as a strategist, working for many years in strategic planning, hands down, this is the best approach that I have come across to date. And when I came across the 9-step framework, I was asking myself, where was the 9-step framework before we really needed it? So early in my career. And of course, we want to share with you tips and tools and techniques and examples, and then we'll close with your Q&A. So please, we want you to enjoy this webinar. We want you to be engaging. We want you to ask your questions, and we are confident that you will learn, because there is just so much insights that we want to share with you. We want to see your organizations move into strategy and strategy execution and grow and become more sustainable, become more successful as strategy professionals. We want you to support your personal growth and development, and we are able to do that. And no better person at this moment to guide you on that. And now we're going to call on our pilots. Howard,
thank
welcome.
you. Thank you. Good day to everybody. I'll take a few minutes just talking about what I call traditional strategic planning and some of the observations that we've made over the years on that. The experience that I'll draw from here is work with, I think now we're close to 400 organizations in over 40 countries. And we have trained well over 10,000 folks from 80 countries in 7 different languages now with the Balanced Scorecard approach that we'll talk about today. There's a lot of different tools that you can use for strategic planning and performance management and measurement and budget planning. I think one of the universities did a study over the last half century, something close to 100 different models and frameworks that have showed up. I tell people I'm a little embarrassed. Over the course of my 40 plus years, I think I've worked on about 30 different models. And when I came across the Balanced Scorecard, that was the one that I settled on as the best of what I had worked with and seen over the years. Blue Ocean has come since that time. Very good tool. Porter's 5 Forces, of course. OKRs are relatively new, coming on strong in the last couple of years. Something called a strategy profile, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And of course, the Balanced Scorecard developed by Kaplan and Norton initially, and enhanced by the Balanced Scorecard Institute into a full integrated strategic planning and management system. MBOs from Peter Drucker, Hoshi Kanari from Akayo. There's a lot of different ways of going about developing strategy and measuring performance. There's also what I call the traditional strategic planning. And traditional strategic planning is more about finding goal buckets to put programs and products and services in. I'll call that the traditional way of doing it. I used to do it that way when I first started. That's the way that I was taught, that you start with a vision and mission statement. So those are what I call high altitude, and then you'd select some strategic goals, usually 6 to 8, something in that range, sometimes more. And then you would look at the programs and projects and services that you were doing, and you'd put them into the goal buckets, choose measures, define your activities, and then go to the budget committees requesting funding. Some of the issues that show up with the traditional approach that we have observed over the years, very inconsistent use of words. For some reason in the traditional approach, it's okay if my goal is your objective and somebody else's program. That turns out to be a real trap if you're trying to build a performance management system. Getting the words right matters a lot, and getting agreement on the dictionary. The strategic plans that came out of this process typically lack a value creation story. It's hard to see how the mission and the vision are translated into value for customers and stakeholders and employees. It's not really clear. It's hard to communicate that value creation story. A lot of times the strategy elements don't seem to connect. It's almost as if somebody wrote the vision statement, somebody else wrote the mission statement, somebody else set the goals, and then somebody else packed the current work that was being done into the goal buckets. And of course, a lot of the strategic plans really don't deal with outcomes, with accomplishments, with results. They typically focus on outputs and the activities that the organization is engaged in. A lot of these plans measure what's easy. They don't measure the hard stuff. Very few strategic measures, mostly operational measures. And a lot of times we see what I call a rush to judgment, where we're anxious to get to measures and projects and sort of get the strategic planning process behind us. Another observation I've made is that these plans typically are written by a few folks in a strategic planning office, maybe the leadership team and a few other folks, and they're not very engaging. In other words, most of the employees have not had a substantive input into the process, and maybe not stakeholders and customers either. So they tend to be very narrowly focused. The other thing we've observed is just that many organizations get this wrong. Kaplan and Norton observed the same thing, that they define the strategy as sort of the collection of things that they're currently working on. And clearly what we're working on today is part of a strategy, but it's not a very good way to define your strategy and tell people what your path and your plan is. So the way we see it, strategy should tell a story. It's a path and a plan based on choices that you make to move from point A to point B. And strategy ties value creation, organizational value creation, to the resources that you need to deliver your goals, deliver on your promises. So let's take a look at a different way of doing strategic planning. I call it the balanced strategic planning approach. And we're going to be much more systematic about how we create strategy in a balanced approach. We're going to look at internal and external. We're going to look at strategy and operations. We're going to look at activities and strategic performance measures. We're going to be concerned about societal goals, about employee satisfaction goals, about customer and stakeholders, and differentiating between those two groups. So what that means is that we have to organize things, in a series of what I call phases. The first one is the process of discovery, thinking about our environment and the risks we're willing to take and alternative scenarios of the future, and who are our customers and who are our stakeholders and what are their different needs. And then the main phases are the planning phase, the alignment phase, and strategy execution. Planning is storytelling, right? The strategy, the key elements of strategy, balanced a plan to communicate strategy, and also a change management plan. I think, one of the things that we've learned over the years is that at its heart, a strategic planning process is essentially a change journey. You do this to help transform an organization into something else, to incorporate change. And I know a lot of the original work, especially the original balanced scorecard work, was all aimed around performance measures. We sort of quickly realized that it's not just about measures. This really is about changing hearts and minds. So when we talk to people about a balanced scorecard system, first and foremost, that's a change initiative. Strategic alignment is about engaging the workforce, the rest of the workforce, with cascading strategy to align business units and the budget process and individuals and groups of individuals. And then strategy execution is implementation. This deals with important things like the leadership and governance, and how do you operationalize strategy, and how do you manage projects and portfolios to incorporate strategic thinking into that process? How do you use performance information to help inform decision-making? How do you build continuous improvement? And of course, how do you incorporate the changes that you want? In our profession, there's not universal agreement on what these terms mean. But if you're going to take on a new planning effort, my recommendation is you get agreement on whatever words that you want to use for your organization. There's somewhere around 20 different components, words, if you will, or groups of words that are used in strategic planning and management. And you really have to make sure your words matter. What we found out is that if my goal, is your objective, we're off on sort of the wrong foot to start with, because as you cascade from the folks who built the strategic plan down, there's going to be different translations of what the goals are and what the words mean, and that's nothing but confusion. So words matter. Before you start, get agreement and set a dictionary so that you can, in fact, create an efficient process. On the right-hand side of this are some of the important elements of balanced strategic planning. Who are our customers? What do they need, right? How do stakeholders, what kind of input do we need from them, from employees? How do we assess our environment? The environmental scan, market analysis, SWOT and PESTEL are traditional tools that we use for the environmental assessment. Setting goals, we call them strategic results, enterprise goals. Strategic themes, these are, somewhat similar to the goal buckets that I mentioned, but in a strategic theme, it goes from high altitude to low altitude. It's like the load-bearing walls of a custom house. It runs all the way vertically through the organization. Typically 3 to 4 strategic themes are what you need. We've built balanced scorecard systems for organizations as small as a dozen employees to whole defense commands with 150,000 or more men and women. And we've always ended up with somewhere between 3 and 4, once in a while 5, but almost always 3 and 4 strategic themes. That's all you really need at a high level to build your strategy and your strategic plan. Anything more than that tends to get confusing for folks. And one of the goals behind this is a strategy can either be complicated or simple. And if you think about how do I connect the dots to make it easy for people to understand my value creation story, you can make it simple. And there's just no reason to make it more complicated and make it harder for folks to implement the strategies that have been created. Strategic KPIs are important to the balanced strategic plan. Project prioritization, how do we decide what things we could focus most on? Influencing the important elements on the right are the enablers on the left. change management. Communication planning is also important. The language of the shop floor is very different than the language of the boardroom. And so there have to be translations as you cascade your strategy through the organization. So how you do communications planning is an important part of this. Inputting societal goals, also important, and managing and mitigating risks, risk tolerance. These are all influencing factors on the strategic plan. So let's talk about a process for doing this. It's 9 steps. It starts with mission and vision, and it uses the 4 perspectives that are created. We've modified the perspectives from the original Kaplan and Norton 4, and I'll explain why we did that in a minute. It starts with launching a program, and then the first 6 steps over on the left are actually developing a balanced strategic plan. A rollout of the plan comes at the end of step 6, and then steps 7, 8, and 9 are implementation. I'll go in a little more detail on those in a minute. So why are we so excited about a balanced scorecard? Well, it solves some issues with in organizations that have not been well covered by traditional strategic planning. I mean, for one thing, it puts the emphasis on strategy, an organization becoming more high performance, using strategy as the common thread through the organization. So you can hook the various things the organization does onto a common thread. It's a really very powerful tool for helping an organization becoming more strategy focused. It also gives you the ability to build an integrated management system where the words are used the same, where the dots connect between high altitude and low altitude, where it incorporates the different inputs that are important to framing how the business grows or the organization grows. And by the way, we use the same balanced scorecard, regardless of sector. We make some modifications for government and not for profit, but the logic stays the same. The dots connect the same, regardless of the sector that you're using it for. We start with senior leadership, but we involve other voices in the organization. The balanced scorecard is not built by a few, people on the top floor of the building. It's built by different voices in the organization. The reason we do that is we strongly believe that buy-in starts on day one. You can't take a strategic plan, turn it over to HR, and say, go implement this. It just doesn't work. It's not efficient, and folks are not on board. There's more resistance than if you get folks involved early. So we use workshops to get to the important components that make up a balanced strategic plan and a scorecard management system. And what happens when you do that is you're building buy-in right from day one. The folks are getting on board. They're understanding what the WIFM, the what's in it for me is, very early. They're carrying that message down to their peers wherever they are in the organization. And it's just a more effective way of doing strategic planning than giving an assignment to one person or to one strategic planning office and say, go build me one. So we involve senior leadership right from the start and help define how we're going to communicate strategy using different messages for the different voices throughout the organization so that everybody gets it and everybody gets on board. Alignment and buy-in are important, right? So the balanced scorecard builds both individual collectability, individual and collective accountability for results. Important outcome of a balanced scorecard. Hard to quantify that, but you sure do see it when you build these management systems. We want to measure what matters. We want a discipline around identifying performance measures that matter. A lot of organizations get this wrong. They ask the wrong question. When they get to this step, they say, what should we measure? That's the wrong question. What you ought to start with is, what are we trying to accomplish? And then the second question is, how will we know success when we see it? And then the third question is, what should we measure? that's going to give us progress toward those things that matter. So we want to incorporate performance results into decision making. So, this isn't an EIS system, an executive information system for senior management. Now we're talking about providing performance information up and down the organization, vertically, right, and horizontally, so that folks who need performance information will have it available to them. Prioritizing projects and initiatives is important. We'll talk about step 6. One of our clients, we arrived, they had 434 projects competing for funding. And at the end of step 6, by running the prioritization part of the framework, we're able to get that down into an A list, a B list, and a C list of important projects to fund and the priority around them. And the A list project consisted of less than a dozen. And for that dozen, the client went and requested and received StratEx money, strategy execution money. So we put a fence around those projects and make sure that they got funded first, because they were critically important to the success of the organization. And then finally, the other issue that's important that a balanced scorecard system does, built this way, is with building employee buy-in, so that you start that early in the process, not late in the process. Tagline is that focusing on strategy turns vision into action. So a program launch is sponsorship, resourcing, setting up the different teams that are needed to develop a balanced strategic plan. There's an assessment step. A lot of organizations will have already done this. So one of the key things to make it simpler is to do an inventory and find out what's good enough to proceed boldly, right, rather than reinventing the wheel. So the process really does look at what exists in the organization that can be used: SWOT analysis, PESTEL analysis, stakeholder focus group results, and so on. And then a workshop to revalidate or create any strategic elements that are missing. Develop those high-level business strategy, those strategic themes and strategic goals. Create a set of strategic objectives. These are actionable objectives that translate the strategy into action. Create a strategy map to visualize the value creation story. Set measures and targets for the strategic objectives based off the strategy map. Create a set of high priority A-list initiatives that will close performance gaps in the objectives to get to the results that we want. And then have a rollout, write the strategic plan, and then roll it out to the rest of the organization with typically an all hands meeting to get everybody else on board, the folks who are not directly involved in building the plan. In a typical organization, let's say a mid-sized, either a government or nonprofit or private sector business, maybe 400 to 1,000 employees, we might involve 20 to 30 folks for a relatively short period of time in actually building a balanced strategic plan. For most of the folks, that's literally no more than a day's commitment. But it's really important to get those different voices on board early, and that's why we have a wide circle for helping to create the balanced strategic plan and get that buy-in. Once we have that, we can better inform budget processes, the budget formulation process, and then provide a basis for operationalizing the strategy with the business units and the support units. Performance analysis takes the measures that were created in the earlier step 5 and puts in place a management information system, reporting requirements, cadence, all the things that are associated with reporting performance. Alignment translates the corporate strategy into business and support unit language so that everybody has strategy as the common thread. And then finally, an evaluation step closes it out, where you ask at the end of usually a year, how are we doing with our balanced scorecard? what's working, what needs to be tweaked, and also how well are we doing against the results that we set for ourselves. The evaluation step can be held more frequently, and sort of high-tech times. I like to say we might do an evaluation on our business strategy every quarter rather than every year, like was the traditional case, or every month. All right, so this is all very organized, very logical. We'll start with the mission and the vision and the core values and the output of the various assessments and scenario planning that are available. Understand who our customers are. Remember, our customers are the direct beneficiaries of our services. And stakeholders are the universe of folks who are interested in our well-being, folks who have an interest in the outcome of what the organization does. So the customers are a subset of the stakeholder universe. And it's important to differentiate, because you're really building value creation for your customers first. The customer could be a citizen if you're a government agency. It could be a warfighter if you're a defense department. It could be a member or a sponsor if you're a nonprofit foundation. So I use the word customer as the direct beneficiary of what it is that the enterprise does. We'll create something called a customer value proposition, which is an input to the strategy planning process. So that goes into the funnel, the process of discovery, I like to call it, and building consensus. We'll choose 4 perspectives and 3 or 4 usually strategic themes and associated strategic results or goals. I mentioned earlier that the themes are like the load-bearing walls on a house. You can actually think of building the whole balanced scorecard system as building a custom house where the mission and vision or values are in the roof, and the strategic results and the strategic themes are the columns and the lintel that holds up the roof. The foundation is core values and communications planning and leadership. And the floors of the house would be the equivalent of the perspectives, different views of strategy. Strategic objectives come out of this thinking, and then a strategy map, and then finally a set of KPIs and strategic initiatives. It's very easy to communicate this when you lay it out logically, because the dots really do connect. The output of one step is the input to the next step. So you don't need a supervisor, you don't need a manual to explain your strategic plan. The words and the logic sort of carry the day without a lot of explanation. So from a logic, again, I talk about strategy from an altitude point of view. The components of strategy come at different altitudes. The customer needs, market needs start at the top. Mission is our purpose. It's what we do. Vision is a picture of the future. Perspectives are those different views of organization performance. Strategic themes and results are the main focus areas, the pillars of excellence, if you will, that are driving the key results that you want. Strategic objectives are those key components that tell a cause-effect value creation story when you put them in a strategy map. Measures and targets capture whether the organization is performing to the desired level. And then finally, a set of strategic projects and action plans that drive the results. Strategic objectives are the critical, literally the DNA of a strategic plan, I like to call them. They're the most important most important among equals, I would say. And they are directly supportive of the strategy. So what we'll do is we'll write a description of a strategic objective, and then identify typically 1 or 2 intended results. And then from those results, we'll develop the KPI. Remember I said early, the right question is not what should we measure? The right question is what are we trying to accomplish? That's answered when you do the intended result from the strategic objectives. Strategic initiatives and performance measures are defined here. The measures provide objective evidence of progress, help inform better decision-making, and offer a comparison that allows you to judge the degree of performance change over time. And the initiatives are a set of strategic projects that are selected to close a performance gap. Here's what a strategy map looks like. This has 15 strategic objectives. Again, to try to keep it simple, we usually recommend 12 to 14 in that range of strategic objectives on a strategy map. I've seen some maps, we get called into fix strategy maps sometimes, and balanced scorecards that have been created without a discipline. And what we usually find is a very large number of strategic objectives, some of which really aren't very strategic at all and aren't very actionable at all. So strategic objective is really something that's continuous improvement, has continuous improvement built into it. So I'm just going to give you a simple example. Number 7 here is increase efficiency and reliability of services, which is one of the objectives in the perspective called processes. Notice that the rows here are the 4 perspectives of a balanced scorecard. In this case, customers is in the top position. That tells me that this is either a government or a nonprofit organization, because the end of the value chain is through the eyes of a customer. Could be a citizen, could be a member of a foundation, could be a donor, and so on. Financial is in the second position, and financial takes on more of a role of stewardship if you're dealing with nonprofit or government. Making good use of other people's money, that's stewardship. Whereas if financial for a business is, ROI and return on equity and shareholder value and profitability and so on. So in a private business, we would put financial in the top perspective, because the end of the value chain is financial performance. In the bottom perspective, Kaplan and Norton call this learning and growth. We call it organizational capacity, because we pick up more than just employee learning and growth. We pick up infrastructure, the tools and technology that the organization uses, employee knowledge, skills, and ability. All of these things are equally important to learning and growth. So we've expanded that perspective. So for each one of the perspectives, we'll develop a matrix that looks something like this, a table. We'll describe the objective in actionable terms, in end outcome language, right? What's the end outcome? What's the result that we want? What are we trying to accomplish in that objective? Based on that description, how will I know success when I see it? What's the intended result? A set of performance measures around those results, a set of targets for, in this case, the next fiscal year, and then a set of strategic initiatives that will help us close the performance gap between where that objective performance level is currently, its baseline, and where we want it to be at the end of the next reporting period. So everything is logically connected, from literally from mission and vision at the top right down through the objectives to the measures and the initiatives. When we align or cascade organization-wide strategy, we're going to keep strategy as the thread. Again, I mentioned notice the top 2 perspectives have a double arrow, right? In the case of private business, we would put financial in the top position. So you start with the strategy map. That's called a tier 1 organization-wide balanced scorecard. We would then translate those objectives into the language of tier 2 business units, could be departments or branches or bureaus, however you're organized. And that would lead us into the things that the tier 2 unit does to support the strategy. So the objectives of tier 2 are not duplicates of what are a tier 1. They're translating the tier 1 strategic objectives into the language of tier 2 and into what the tier 2 unit does to support corporate strategy. And then tier 3, we'd look at job descriptions, individual performance goals, and so on, and create a set of personal objectives that support the group that the employee or groups of employees, let's say you're dealing with a call center, be groups of employees, write personal objectives that support their department objectives. So let me give you some tools and tips, some things that we've learned along the way, and hopefully you'll be able to take something if you're going through a process like this. Some of these tips and tools can be used regardless of whether you're building a balanced scorecard system or not. The real tip to start with, if for those of you who have had Stephen Covey training, one of his leadership principles, number 2, if memory serves, it's been about 30 years since I took that training, is begin with the end in mind, one of the major leadership principles. That's probably a key takeaway from my experience, my learning over the years. Start with the end in mind and work backwards. That's not the way most of us are built to think. I'm an engineer, so I tend to think about the building blocks and connecting things, but it's hard to think about starting with the roof of the house and working backwards. You start with the foundation and you build upwards. But the reality is, when you're building a balanced scorecard system, you're really, because you're involving people at different levels of the organization in the process, you're really building down and building up at the same time. So it's much more effective. It's much better connected logically and simpler, easy to understand what the organization is working on and how will it celebrate success. So we always want to start with mission and vision and values first. That sort of frames the pictures of the organization's successful future. And then strategy is, down 5,000 feet, if you will, in altitude. So that's our high level path and plan, strategic themes and results or goals. Business and support units. Now we're dealing with objectives and the programs and projects and services that are needed to implement the plan. Those are strategic operating plans that are created for each one of the business and support units. And then personal goals show basically how somebody fits in and how the work that they do helps the organization grow and helps themselves grow as individuals, how what I do matters. Here's a very handy tool that we use all the time. I mentioned the system components, balanced strategic plan, balanced scorecard system components over on the left. So one of the first things we always do when we consult is to do an inventory, take an inventory of where you are with the system components. In our book that we published, The Institute Way, there's an appendix called Characteristics of Good. And so what we do is compare what the organization currently has against that set of characteristics of good. I hesitate to use the word best practices because I haven't seen all the practices, but you get the idea. We're really trying to compare what the organization currently has to a set of best practices. And then we'll make a judgment as to whether it's acceptable the way it is, or whether it has to be revised or created from whole cloth. Most organizations have some of these things. Very, very often they're not very well connected. You can't go from a mission to a vision to a set of strategic themes. The logic doesn't track very well. So this process of taking an inventory can be really helpful. A strategy profile is a very powerful tool. Again, you can use this with a balanced scorecard. You can use it as a standalone tool coming out of charting your company's future from Harvard Business Review. What this does is create a set of a picture, if you will, of what's important to the organization in terms of the components of its strategy. This is a case of Southwest Airlines, which started as a regional airline in the U.S. and grew to an international airline by essentially doing almost everything different than other airlines when they started 30 or 40 years ago. They looked at the current airlines and said, we want to disrupt, we want to innovate, we want to be different. So they made choices about keeping their prices low, not offering meals, No lounges, they're too expensive. We want to keep our costs low. Limited seating choices, none at the start. Spoke and hub, not a good idea. Let's just fly all the same aircraft, Boeing 737s. Every airplane we own is going to be a 737. We don't have to have separate training facilities for 777s and Embraers and all the other planes that are out there in different crews. We're all going to treat them the same, inventory equipment for one plane and so on. Service, we're going to really excel at that. We think some of the airlines have cold service. We're going to have fun on our planes and make people want to come back for another ride. And finally, turnaround time. Southwest benchmarked themselves against a racing pit crew to see if they could learn anything to improve how fast they turned around their airplanes on the ground to get them flying and making money. So this helped them figure out what are the levers that they need to pull to make a difference and be successful. So the strategy profile, and we've used this in government agency also, where you want to get to excellence, right? What are the differentiators that can allow you to get to excellence with the services that you provide to your members or to your citizens? On goal setting, typically the goals serve four basic functions: providing guidance, facilitate planning, motivating, and evaluating and control performance. So, what I like to do is look at the major buckets of goals: strategic goals, employee goals, operational goals, societal goals, and project goals, and just look at the different things that we're trying to do in each of those areas. You need a slightly different hat on, and it helps to compartmentalize the conversation. Incidentally, one of the other big benefits of a process like this is not something you're going to measure as an ROI, but it's getting employees who don't work with each other talking to each other and learning from each other. The results of that are absolutely huge through the facilitation and workshop process of building those cross-functional teams of employees working on horizontal processes, for example. The outcomes are really can be really breathtaking when people figure out how they fit in and what they do matters. To use an example of this, I always like to use the example. My job is to keep the trains running on time. From a strategic goal point of view, we want to make sure, we set the right locations, we have the right equipment, we understand who our customers are, we understand how we make money. Employees goals, we want to make sure that they have knowledge and ability and skill, we have them in the right position, we have bench strength, we have cross training. Operational goals, we want to control costs and make sure our equipment is highly utilized. We want a good safety record. We want on-time trains. Societal goals, we're worried about social equity and our involvement in communities. Our environmental footprint is an important goal. From project point of view, we're going to have to buy new equipment, schedules, and resources, maintain the tracks, refurbish the stations, install new software, and so on. So, by breaking things into components like this, you can really get some deep dive conversations and not, be scattered over the, sort of over the whole board with the conversations. It really does help to focus conversations around the things that matter. One of my favorite tools is something called Ishikawa diagram or fishbone diagram. It does start with the end in mind. In this case, for example, I start with a desired result, and I ask myself, how am I going to get better at this, right? To improve customer satisfaction is a strategic objectives. And then I'm going to ask myself, well, how will I measure that? And I can go backwards through this chain to look at the drivers of the result that I want. I have to improve my product delivery. I have to improve the interaction with my customers. I want efficiency improvements in production, and I want to improve my resourcing, my funding, and my workforce and my infrastructure. So by working backwards like this and asking yourself, what drives what, you're going to have very insightful conversations about finding the levers that matter and then putting your performance measures on the stuff that matters, not just the easy stuff that you would get if you ask the question, what should we measure? A disciplined process will tell you what you should be measuring, and then you can set about doing that. Communications, our approach is to think about what works best, for different generations. Clearly, a two-way communication is always better. I remember the example I gave you earlier about 434 projects with the Susan Komen organization in Dallas, Texas. And a new CEO was coming on board as we were building the balanced strategic plan. And the first thing she did was meet with the 400 some employees in brown bag lunches in groups of 8 or 10, so that she got to meet everybody in the organization and got to understand what they did, what their concerns were. And it was a very effective way, two-way communications, literally one-on-one or small group dialogue to move up. We call this a communications ladder, to move up the communication ladder to make sure that your message, she talked about her goals and her aspirations for Susan Komen under her watch. So this is really way above, a PowerPoint presentation and a fax or even a website, things that are all one-way communications. When you're done, it looks like this. We're able to get a strategic plan on one page. I call this a one-page balanced strategic plan. This is for a natural gas producer, one of our clients. The vision was to be a revolutionizing provider of energy products, not just natural gas. They were expanding into other energy. Their mission is there. There are 3 strategic themes: international growth, operational excellence, and energy leadership. End outcome strategic results were written for each of those, so it was very clear how to measure whether they were making progress in those 3 thematic areas. The strategy map is shown on the left. There, the core values are down at the bottom, underpinning the strategy. A set of strategic objectives. Remember, all strategic objectives are actionable. They start with action verbs. A set of performance measures and targets are developed, and then a set of initiatives. That's a balanced strategic plan in one page. Easy to communicate, easy to understand, and then your programs, projects, and services that support these can be in a supporting document or even an appendix. Some of our clients will turn this into sort of the executive summary of the plan, and then create a 10 to 15 to 20 page document that goes into more detail behind the one-page executive summary. Those are some tools and some tips and some examples, some things that we've learned over the years of doing balanced strategic planning. Hopefully this has helped you in some way to think about things and maybe try something new and something different in your organization. Dwayne, I'll turn it back to you in conclusion.
All right, thank you very much, Howard. So, Balanced Scorecard Institute and Return on Investment Consulting, we help organizations, all types, whether they're government organizations, whether private sector organizations, or they're working in NGO or civil society. And we support entities with strategy. We believe in building transformational strategy using the 9-step framework will help companies to become more sustainable or to grow, strengthen their capabilities. So we have a team that really supports strategy, end-to-end strategy. And we also, prioritization is also very powerful. We recognize that in many organizations, prioritization is something that they're struggling with. Cascade has done one study, and what it recognized, an average of 35% of the resources in projects that are not supported strategy, and therefore it needs prioritization is very important. And as Howard actually pointed out, take it through a process where you can identify your A list of projects, your B list of projects, your C list of projects, and take you through a process to ensure that you are able to really prioritize. For many organizations, the concept of cascading and alignment are mere concepts. There's really no practical way of ensuring the mission and vision and strategy line. There's no practical way to ensure that your corporate level is strategies connected to the various departments and units and our subsidiaries. And the Balanced Scorecard Institute, right, we have a methodology that can take you through to ensure that there's a process align your strategy right throughout the organization. We also learned from our experience digitizing strategic plans for organizations in Cascade, strategy execution and software for the Caribbean part for Cascade. All the organizations so far come across generally struggle with alignment. This is when they're recognizing they're digitizing their strategy. They recognize how far out of alignment their plans are. Therefore, we support this methodology in driving alignment. We also recognize from analyzing several plans that we looked at, we worked with clients in driving performance. We recognize that there is really not diversity in the type of measures that many organizations tend to measure. Many organizations tend to go for the easy measures, or what we call the direct measures. And therefore, as a result, if there's a case where you need to track, for example, employee engagement, which may require having an index, in many cases, organizations will avoid looking at those types of measures. Again, many organizations do not capture a lot of outcome measures. Beginning with the end in mind and really being able to capture your intended results, measure your intended results. So we also walk you through the process. I want to just share with you, the issue one method that really allow you to break the chain of activities into different buckets that you're able now to identify a menu of measures, and through that process you're able to say what are the best measures to tell me how we're making progress. We walk you through that process, consulting practice, and we'll be very happy to support our clients in building their balance plans, helping to transform the organization, or helping you to prioritize. So we do end-to-end strategy, and we love to support in your growth, build high performance company with more strategy. Upcoming courses that we want to share with you. We have the Balanced Scorecard Professional Certification that is July 18th to 26th. We are inviting you to participate. For those who are attending the webinar, we are offering you 33% discount. And of course, we can also share a link to you so you can pay if you're able to do that now. We also have the Certified Strategy Execution Professional course that is also coming up in September. We are inviting you to participate. Strategy execution is also very powerful, along with alignment. We know strategy execution is a major challenge for most organizations. Now, so not only do you spend resources on projects that are not aligned to the strategy, but we also know that the average project is delayed between 7 to 10 months. And these are, strategy execution challenges because you get your execution through your projects as a primary component of execution. And therefore, this course really helps to concretize and go deeper into what we have learned from the Balanced Scorecard Professional certification, where you get hands-on exposure to developing your plan. Strategy execution now will take you even further in terms of how do you support execution throughout your organization? How do you understand your culture? And what is very powerful about these courses? You get the tools, you get the examples, so you can go back to your organization and start applying them. So I want to really encourage you to explore the opportunities with us, and we'll be happy to take your questions. I know we have 2 questions in the chat, but we're happy to take your. Right. So we have some questions. I think we are going to share these questions between us, or if our viewers direct them. But I think the first one I will actually take is that I remember you mentioned very early that the 9-step framework can be applied to any industry. And I know there was a question that was asked if the 9-step framework could be adopted towards industry. We will say that the 9-step framework can be applied to any industry, any type of organization. And first and foremost, in any effective strategy process, you must start with an assessment. So it doesn't matter if you're in the private sector, or you're in public sector, or you're in the social sector, NGO, you will start with an assessment. Defining what your strategy is also very important, no matter what industry you're in. And I just want to make this quick distinction. In many cases, persons mix planning with strategy. The truth is, we all plan. We're planning for a vacation, we're planning for an event, but that does not equate to a strategy. And therefore, it doesn't matter which industry you're in, you need to craft precisely what is your strategy, what the organization need to focus on to win. And therefore, those are some of the critical components of the 9-step framework. Or I don't know if there's anything that you want to add.
I was going to say maybe Claudette could share some of her experience on this as well, if you would, please.
Well, there is one question I'm seeing, Howard and Dwayne, that speaks to if planning for a department is the vision, mission, etc., that of the organization, or do you create one of the department? And the BSI way, the Balanced Scorecard Institute's way, is absolutely to keep the vision and mission for the organization consistent. We would not recommend that a department has a vision and a mission, but you could have a purpose statement.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yep. The purpose statement connects the business or support unit to the enterprise-wide mission and vision. The reason we came to that, just a little bit of history, we had several clients who didn't do it that way. They actually had separate mission and vision statements for each of the departments underneath them. And there was a lot of confusion because these departments tend to take on sort of a life of their own. So it's really very hard to get sort of cross-department coordination because a lot of times that was in violation to the vision and mission that they independently wrote. So our advice always is to use a common mission and vision, but
Yeah.
create unique purpose statements. Yeah.
There's a strategy objective map question. Jessica says, do they have to flow to each other? Or can some of them live within their lane without necessarily flowing to another objective or another perspective lane? Jessica, typically they flow because it tells the story. It's okay to skip a lane. So you could skip a perspective, but it needs to end somewhere. So you could skip, if you're in the organizational capacity lane, as you call it, you could skip internal process, but you must at least go to customer. And then customer would go to, you can skip, while you can skip one, we believe that there needs to be a connection because it tells the story. If you did what, then what? If you did what, then what? So it really needs to end somewhere. It needs to be adding value. So because it really shows the creation of the value throughout the organization at all the levels throughout the organization. Hope that answers that question.
Another way of thinking about it, Claudette, or a supporting way, is the two bottom perspectives are what we call the driving perspectives. Those are the objectives that drive results. And the top two perspectives are financial and customer. So through the eyes of the customer, what is the value? Through the eyes of financial performance or stewardship, what is the organization value? So your objectives need to end, in one of those two top perspectives to complete the value creation story. That's another way of thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, you've been asked, Howard, to share. Can you repeat the slide about communication? Such an important slide.
Yeah, there's a handout that's coming with this.
Okay, so you want to skip that one?
Yeah, but I think
right.
the important thing is two-way communication is always better than one-way communication, because you're getting feedback, you're creating dialogue. You're going to end up asking much harder questions of yourself if there's two-way communication around the strategy. You just get a deeper dive as a result of that.
Yeah.
Now, remember, when you're creating a communication plan, you're going to create messages for different levels of the organization. You'll have different resistances as you build out a management system, because it's a change management system, really. So you're going to have resistance. So how you craft that communication plan is critically important. We actually have a communication workshop that's built into the consulting. It's a 2 or 3 day workshop to actually get at, what are the messages, what's the media, what's the timing, and who should the messenger be, so that you actually craft the different messages of why the balanced scorecard, why now, why are we transforming the organization, and you put it into a communications plan.
That two-way communication, it typically is very, very powerful, because can you imagine you rolling out a strategic plan and you engage the team members in such a way that they are now starting to give feedback? And can you imagine you take one feedback and make a change? The message is sent to the entire organization, how involved and engaged they are. They would have been engaged before, but even after formulating the plan on a 1 page, they're still giving feedback. That amounts to them co-creating and being such a part of the plan. It really, really is impactful, and I've seen that work.
Very good.
There's a question from Bethany that says, how many initiatives are typical for the tier 1 strategy? We seem to have approximately 10 to 12 each year, but it still feels like the executors of the strategy that everything is a priority. We understand that happens all the time. Howard, you look like you want to jump on that one.
Everything is on the A list.
Yes.
Typically we would shoot for somewhere between under 10 would be my guidance. In the case of Susan Komen, we ended up with 8 or 9, as I recall. It was some years back. Final strategic objectives. Almost always it's 10 or less at that high level. Now these are major projects, right? These are corporate wide. They cross departmental boundaries. So these are big ticket projects that typically make the A list. Sometimes it's not a big ticket item, though. Sometimes it's a short-term project that represents a quick strategic win for the organization. And I always advise folks, when you're building a system like this, make sure you have one quick win in that list of in the A list, That'll help folks get on board with the changes that you're building in to the management system. They'll see some progress, they'll see some immediate results, and that goes a long way to help institutionalize a system like this. Typically, it's very fast to build a balanced scorecard. We've built these systems in, as little as 4 weeks with the nights and weekends kind of an effort. Typically, it's 2 to 3 months. It takes 2 to 3 years typically to institutionalize a new system like this, where people aren't even thinking about the balanced scorecard. It just becomes the way we work around here. So recognize that there's a short-term goal here and a long-term goal for your management system. If you're building the whole management system, you're building just the strategic plan. This is a several weeks exercise, 3, 4, 5 weeks kind of an exercise to get it done this way.
So Eddie's
Right,
saying that as a go ahead, Dwayne.
Right. I just want to add that one of the reasons you may struggle in getting the priority right is just maybe the criteria that you're using to select your projects, and maybe you want to review what the criteria you're using and ensure that you're rigid, you're strong. They're looking at good metrics. You're looking at maybe your net present value, you're looking at the payback period, you're looking at just the benefits that you'll derive from the project. So you want to ensure that you have great criteria. And one of the things that we actually walk through when you do strategic project management with the Balanced Scorecard Institute is actually looking at your capability as an organization. And therefore, you want to be very honest in your evaluation. You have the capabilities to really execute effectively and efficiently these projects or these initiatives that you have. And again, bear in mind that we spend a lot of money that sometimes are not supporting genuine strategic initiatives. So you want to really ensure you have a strong prioritization approach to your projects.
So Dwayne, probably that is also to answer Eddie, because Eddie says as a portfolio manager, it always seems that I am debating with the executive team with the alignment of projects, programs, and related work to the strategy. My question is, 1, how can I make this transition to becoming a strategic consultant? And 2, are you hiring? But I will answer the question he didn't ask, which is, or just to say that the 9-step framework could possibly resolve that issue. Until you become a consultant, Eddie, you make that transition. And about the hiring, if you think of the 9-step framework, I really believe it's such a focused approach to strategy, the steps, that when you get to the place of doing the strategic initiatives and looking at the programs and the projects, you would not be debating at all what is necessary to improve those strategic objectives, because the initiatives are going to be related to the strategic objectives that you would have established that you need to do to improve and achieve the strategic themes. Because if you go to the level of that you're breaking down the vision into actionable activities, you're talking about the strategic objectives. And if you agree that you follow the process and you agree the strategic objectives, then when you have time to think about the strategic initiatives, there wouldn't be any argument about alignment with the strategy. That is how I'd answer that. Anybody else want to add to that?
No, that's good. That's exactly right.
So the other, you mentioned about the strategy planning meeting involving multi-level group of approximately 30 persons. What would be the consistency of each level do you suggest from the board level to workflow? I think Howard, you spoke to this, so probably when you go on to that.
Recognize that these would be separate workshops, not involving 40 people at once. We would start with a strategic management team, which would be the principal leader, could be the CEO. Sometimes it might be a CAO or a CFO, or it might be a board member and his or her direct report. So that would constitute the strategic management team. And we would go through steps, basically 1 and 2 to get those folks on board. We would add something called strategic theme team groups. Once the themes were set, we would break another set of teams, typically 4, 5, 6, 7 employees, plus one of the folks from the strategic management team who would work on a theme and create a set of strategic objectives for that theme. Then we would bring all those folks together for one workshop where we would take all of the objectives and create super objectives from the set of each of the theme objectives. And that would be the first pass at building the corporate strategy map. Then we would go back to the management team to show them the progress that we made on that, get their additional guidance. And then we would continue with different teams for the initiatives and for the performance measures. So while a total of 30 or 40 different folks might be involved in this process, you know, each one and the project manager, each one of them would have a relatively little, you know, small role time-wise, but very important because of who we select to be on those teams. The selection process is actually really important because we look for people. We don't look at how much money they make. We don't look at their titles. We look at who has knowledge of the processes that are customer facing, horizontal processes, because that's the way value is created in the organization. It's the connection of the dots of the horizontal processes that leads you to a customer value proposition. So who's on the team is really critical. We want to see somebody from IT, somebody from HR, somebody who's a process improvement folks, budget people, finance, strategic planning, of course. So we spend a good deal of time with the client sorting through the potential folks who would make good players. We want a maverick or two. We like to have new ideas thrown out on the table. Sometimes the maverick idea is literally the one that carries the day. We've seen that happen more than once. So we always like to get a variety and folks who don't necessarily know each other into those conversations. And the key, of course, is good facilitation to manage those voices in the room, because you're essentially bringing together groups with disparate backgrounds, but who are experts in their own areas. And you're trying to take those pieces of thread and make whole cloth out of it. So the facilitation of this is really critical. That's why ROIC and our other partners are selected very carefully who can help you through this process.
So Noreen is
Right.
asking.
We are
ahead.
running out of time.
Okay.
We will take 2 more questions. So go the one for Noreen.
Yes, the
then
one
you'll
for
wrap.
Noreen.
Thank
We
you.
wrap one and one other. Okay,
sticking
so
with
starting
us.
the planning process with the end in mind requires an accurate assessment of your current state. What are the best ways to get the organization to recognize that reality in order to build on clear visioning of next steps? Wow. I'll start by saying that my experience tells me that during the discovery, that assessment stage and phase of the steps, you must consider the current situation. You must consider where you are at, because that's where it starts. And you have to do that consideration relative to the vision.
Yeah, I would add, I read the question as, you know, how do I essentially sell an approach like this to higher management? I always approach it from both a pain alleviation side and a benefit side. You know, I mentioned to you some of the benefits of the balanced scorecard. The flip side of that is looking at what the pains in the organization currently are, and then looking at the balanced scorecard as a very big tent, which it is, and saying, now, how can this process that we go through help alleviate those pains? So when I talk to a senior executive, I always, one of the first questions is, what keeps you up at night, right? What keeps you awake at night? What do you worry about? And then can I translate that pain into some benefit that you'll get from a balanced scorecard system or not? We don't solve everything, that's for sure, but the balanced scorecard really is a big tent and will help with a lot of those pains.
All right, Howard, I think this final question I want to direct it to you. What have you found to be the biggest challenge in implementing the system? Some things it's too academic. How would you suggest selling this system clearly to management?
Yeah, I thought it was too academic when it was first created also. And so that literally is the reason I took a year after I retired from federal government service in Washington, DC, and running the Foundation for Performance Measurement, to create the framework because I thought it needed to be made more practical. And I thought that the focus on performance measures was too narrow. So that's the reason I wrote the framework that I did. It's, we're really practical folks. And so I mentioned keeping it simple and making it as easy as possible. Biggest challenge, losing support if you don't go high enough in an organization. Probably the classic case of a failure is from something called, I think it was the New England United Way Foundation. It was a Harvard business case study written some years back of a balanced scorecard that went in, and the CEO was 100% behind it. And he got relieved of his duties by the board about 3 months into the project, and it just collapsed. The new guy came in and didn't want a balanced scorecard, so that was the end of that effort. So what we always try and do is build support. Another reason we do the workshops the way we do, we're building support up and down the organization, not just through the senior leader. It's important to go as high in the organization as you can to get that champion, that executive champion, but it doesn't stop there. You want to build champions at different levels, because as people start buying into this, they're going to start buying in when they see something good is going to happen to them and something good is going to happen to the organization. Then the balanced scorecard sort of rolls on its own because people are buying in without you telling them that they have to buy in. It's a huge difference. It's a game changer in how a strategic plan is built and implemented. And that's where you get some of the biggest smiles in the room. When the light bulb goes on, people say, now I get it. So that's the way we're going to do it. Work on the pain side and work on the benefit side, and then make sure that you have created champions at different levels to support this if a leader leaves or some other disruption occurs.
Right, and I will also add that there are many forms of balanced scorecard out there, but the Balanced Scorecard Institute way is very different in terms of that step-by-step approach.
Right.
But
And
more
make sure you-
importantly,
And make sure you
is-
get a certified, one of the certified associates to help you. There's
yes,
folks out there who are doing the 9-step framework who are not partners of the institute and maybe doing it not the way that we have built it. So be careful about
right.
that.
Yes, and it's tested and proven. And so sometimes we have to also sell that in terms of the clients that we have actually worked with using the 9-step framework. Right. Howard, any final words?
Well, that's
from
it.
you?
I thank you for the opportunity. I always
Yes.
enjoy sharing. We're educators first, I would say, consultants second, and so on. So it's always nice to share what we've learned on the area of strategy and the management systems. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Indeed. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And
Yes.
we're looking forward to hearing from you. We're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.